So you're thinking about moving to St. Petersburg, Florida. You've watched all the videos, you've seen the sunrise over Tampa Bay from the pier on maybe one of your weekend getaways here. You've seen the pastel bungalows on the tree-lined brick streets, which are amazing, the murals in Grand Central District, the Dali Museum, and somewhere in the middle, you've started asking yourself the real question: is St. Petersburg the right move for me? And if you're someone who's already decided the Tampa Bay area is the move, and you're now trying to figure out whether St. Petersburg specifically is your version of the Florida lifestyle that you've dreamed of, this video is for you. Because honestly, here's what most people probably get wrong. They're asking, is St. Petersburg a good place to live? And the answer to that question easily is yes. But that's probably not the question that actually matters most to you. Because the real question is your version of the Florida lifestyle the version that St. Petersburg actually delivers? Because St. Pete is a vibe, and it's a very specific one. And it's an incredible place to live for one kind of person. And by that very definition, it probably means it's not gonna be great for another. So today I'm gonna walk you through 5 things, including one piece of insider information about flood zone repairs. And the reason I'm laughing is because my home flooded during Hurricane Milton, which could honestly change what neighborhood you'd consider buying in. And once you understand all 5 of those, the answer to whether St. Pete is for you or not gets a lot clearer. And if we've never met before, my name is Juan Alcala, and a little over 7 years ago, my wife Kate and I sold almost everything we owned, packed up our family of 5, moved 1,200 miles south here to the greater Tampa Bay area, where we have been loving it ever since. But trust me, I know what that decision feels like from the inside. I'm also a licensed realtor and a team leader here with the Tru Living Group, where we've helped over 200 families make that exact same move. And here's what I've learned about St. Pete specifically. Most of the families who struggle here or struggled here weren't the ones who picked the wrong house. They were the ones who picked the right city for the wrong reasons. They might have moved to St. Pete because they loved their weekend here, and they didn't understand what actually living here means day to day, or how the flood insurance situation really affects what neighborhoods actually fit them. And the good news is that's actually a problem that can be solved. You just need the right information before you start house hunting, not after it. And before we get too deep into it, just a quick note, I have an agent on my team who lives this market every day, and her name is Madison Cruz. And what makes Madison unique is not only is she a St. Pete resident, she's also a military veteran, and she's someone I personally relocated to the area just over 3 years ago. And in the year and a half she's spent on my team, she's already helped over 30 families make that exact same move. So if any point you want a real conversation about a specific neighborhood, there's a link in the description below that'll take you to my contact page where you can literally schedule a time to talk with Madison and I, who will unpack the entire situation and really help you design a plan that is best for you. Now let's get into it. So let's start where most people tend to get tripped up. They hear things like St. Pete is a vibe, and I know it because I say it. And they think that means restaurants and breweries, and that's just a tiny piece of the type of living that you have access to here. And the thing that I think most people don't tell you is St. Pete is genuinely one of the most walkable cities in the entire state of Florida. And in a state mostly built around strip malls and car commutes, that's a very big deal. So what does walkable truly mean? Well, let me give you some actual numbers. There's a website called WalkScore, and it gives St. Pete an overall score of 94 out of 100. The national average is 48, and downtown St. Pete sits at 99, which is why they call it a walker's paradise. And the bike score downtown is a 97. For most things that you would do, your errands on a day-to-day basis, if you live downtown, you're not going to need a car. And that's a very different version of Florida than most people picture when they imagine moving here. And if you're coming from areas like the Northeast or anywhere with a real downtown, think of areas like Brooklyn, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Boston, and that thought of a strip mall lifestyle really makes people sad. And this is what really tends to pull people towards St. Pete. You know, you can live in a 1920s craftsman bungalow on a brick-lined street in historic Kenwood or Old Northeast. You can walk to coffee in the morning, walk to dinner at night, and bike the waterfront on the weekend. And in my experience, that's not just the vibe that people are talking about, it's the one that they actually want. So if you're chasing the Florida lifestyle where you trade that car for a Florida beach cruiser and you get to hear neighbors on their front porch on the weekend, St. Pete is gonna deliver the best option of anywhere in Tampa Bay. But if your version of Florida is a quiet pool and a gated community, we'll get to that in a minute as well, and the answers here might be a little bit different. And here's where things really start to get interesting, because honestly, all these vibes, they're gonna come with complication, and that complication is the single biggest thing nobody really wants to talk about. So let's just get it out of the way, because we're gonna talk about flooding. More importantly, I want you to think of it this way. St. Pete is a peninsula on a peninsula in the ocean. There's water everywhere. And that's a huge part of the appeal, but it's also the source of the most important piece of math that you have to do before you buy a home here. So let's get into the big picture number first and then dial it in. About 45% of all of the homes in St. Petersburg are flagged as a risk of severe flooding over the next 30 years. That's almost half. And after Hurricane Helene and Milton came through in 2024, the city had close to 16,000 homes with significant flooding damage. So yes, flooding is real. And y'all, I've personally been through this. I've shared this journey with everyone on YouTube. Our home had flooding in 2024 from all of the massive amounts of rain we had from Hurricane Milton. So this isn't just a thing that I'm describing from the outside, it's something we've actually lived. And here's what most people don't see who are considering moving here. There's a huge difference between St. Pete has flood risk, which we all know, and the house you're about to buy has a flood risk. Some St. Pete neighborhoods sit at an elevation that has basically zero exposure. Others are in AE zones where mortgage lenders will require flood insurance from day one. I mean, there's neighborhoods like Shore Acres that flood when you think about rain. When the king tides come in, their streets can flood. So knowing which one you're walking into is the real homework. And unfortunately, most real estate agents don't do this work for you. And it happens for a few different reasons. One, they may not be local to the area. Two, they don't know how to do the research. Or three, they don't know what questions to ask before you buy a home. So if you are considering buying a home in any of these areas in Pinellas County, make sure you get an agent who knows how to guide you through this process. And if you have more questions about this, like I said, don't hesitate to reach out to me and the team. I've actually made videos about this subject that are also helpful. And here's that insider piece of information that I was talking about earlier. It's called the FEMA 50% rule. And it's actually pretty simple when you think about it. And the rule itself is pretty simple. If you ever need to repair or renovate a flood zone home, and the cost of that work is more than 50% of the building's value, then that entire home has to be brought up to the current flood code standards, which in a lot of circumstances often means elevating the home. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes way more. And honestly, that part most people have probably heard, but here's the part that nobody tells you, and this is the one that changes everything. There's what's known as a look-back period. And this is how far back the local government counts previous work against your 50%. And this is different depending on which city or what area you're buying in. So let's start with St. Pete. The city itself has no look-back period, zero. Your 50% number essentially resets after every storm. In unincorporated Pinellas County, they have a 1-year look-back period. St. Pete Beach, Treasure Island, and Paso Grill have a 5-year look-back period. And that's a part that should really change how you shop. Because if you're house hunting on Paso Grill and the previous owner did a kitchen reno 3 years ago, that kitchen counts against your repair budget if the storm hits next year. And you might not even know it because nothing about it shows up on the listing itself. So here's what that means to your wallet. If you buy a home in the city of St. Petersburg proper, your renovation and storm repair flexibility is dramatically better. Buy on the beaches, the math gets harder, and you need a contractor and insurance agent who actually know how to model it for you. And this is the exact kind of thing that Madison walks our clients through before they fall in love with a specific house. And this isn't scary information. It's the information that lets you buy with confidence instead of regret ultimately. And speaking of confidence, this brings up the question of where you should actually be looking. St. Pete is not just one place. It's basically 4 or 5 lifestyles wearing a ton of different zip codes. So let's start looking at them by price and personality so you can figure out which community probably fits you best. And let's start with the market conditions of the whole city so the prices below can make some sense. Because right now at the time of this recording, the median sales price across St. Pete is around $495,000. That's up about 20% year over year according to Redfin. 20%. Now, I know a lot of people are talking about how Florida is crashing, but St. Pete is not one of those areas. Now, the average home in the area is taking longer to sell. It's sitting on the market about 52 days. So it's more of a balanced market, but it is definitely leaning towards the buyer side. There's a lot more homes for sale, which is called inventory, which typically means you're gonna have more time to make a qualified decision. But as we all know, the best house in the best neighborhood, those tend to go fast. St. Pete's not any different. But let's break it down even further and start getting into some of these communities that people are really interested in. And I'm talking about areas like historic Northeast and Snell Isle as an example. And this is picture book St. Pete. You're talking about old growth oak trees, canopy lined brick streets, 1920 craftsman's bungalows, coffee pot bayou where you can see dolphin and people paddleboarding and riding their boats. You're gonna walk to Vinoy Park, walk to Beach Drive, walk to the pier. And if you're looking at single family homes, the restored bungalows here typically run $700,000 to $1.2 million. They can of course go much higher than that, but that's the average over the last 30 days really. And if you look at Snell Isle specifically, that pushes way past that for waterfront living. And here's something worth noting. Snell Isle has one of the lowest crime rates in the entire region. As a matter of fact, according to the FBI database, it's 92% lower than the national average. So if your ideal lifestyle is walkable, historic charm, and you have the budget, this is going to be your bullseye. And then if you head 15 to 30 blocks west, you're looking at areas like historic Kenwood and Grand Central District. These have a very similar vibe, but they are definitely more accessible. This is bungalow heaven with one of the strongest neighborhood associations in the city. When you're walking around, you will see the historic Kenwood flags everywhere. It's a really cool experience. And you still have walkability. There are about 70 restaurants within walking distance, bars and coffee shops. And I share this all the time. One of my favorite taco shops in all of Tampa Bay is down there, and that's called Casitas. It's this old gas station that they turned into this incredible taco shop. The hospitality is amazing. There's always people and their pets, and man, it's just a cool spot to hang out. You've got the Arts District right by there, and this is one of those mid-tier price points for the area. You know, it sits at around $450,000 to $700,000 on average for a 3-bed bungalow, depending on its condition, of course. And this is where a lot of our budget-conscious transplants typically end up because it gives you that daily walkability without that old Northeast price tag. Then there's areas like Crescent Lake, Crescent Heights, historic Uptown. These are also more affordable, walkable options. They are very family friendly because of the single family housing. They're still close to downtown, typically $350,000 to $550,000 on average. You know, if you're a young family, retirees, or even a single professional who wants a walkable lifestyle, but you're not ready to write a $900,000 check, these are gonna be real options. And then of course there's the downtown high-rise condos. And it gets its own category because honestly, this is where the cap out money goes. Buildings like Saltaire, 1 St. Petersburg, 400 Central, Icon Central, the median listing price downtown right now is about $1.45 million. With a real range from around $400,000 for smaller units up to $3 million plus for the higher floors. The median sales price in downtown St. Pete jumped to $1.5 million in February, which is that high-rise condo market specifically driving that number. So if your lifestyle is lock the door and leave, full amenities, walk to the pier, and travel 6 months out of the year, this is going to be your play. Just know that the flood zone math still applies to high-rises, even though you're physically above the water. But what about shore acres, Juan, those challenging, similar low-lying areas? You know, these are beautiful neighborhoods that are really water adjacent, but honestly, this is where the flood exposure is gonna be at its highest, and you really need to do your diligence. You know, I'm not afraid to tell clients, if you're willing to move into shore acres, you better make sure that you have an airboat ready as well. Because you need to go in with your eyes wide open about insurance and the elevation that that home sits at. Their range is going to be wide here. You know, they're still selling homes for $450,000 to well over $1 million, depending on water access or not. And it's not a no, but it's a very different kind of yes. We're talking, you know, $5,000 added to a policy, $10,000. Some of these homes are honestly uninsurable because they haven't done the necessary repairs yet. And this is where you want to make sure you have a professional guiding you through the process if you're going to entertain these types of properties. But what if you're more into that gated suburban St. Pete kind of thing? Well, then you're going to be looking at communities like Isle del Sol, the Bayway Isles, Tierra Verde. These are golf gated communities, more traditional Florida suburban. They'll offer townhomes and condos in the 700 to 2 million plus range. And here's my take on it. If gated suburban lifestyle is what you actually want, you might be better served looking at areas like Lakewood Ranch in Manatee County or Dunedin north of Clearwater. Those communities deliver that type of lifestyle a little bit more cleanly, if you will. And the flood zone math is definitely friendlier. But if you have your heart set on St. Pete because it's St. Pete and it's a vibe, then areas like Isle del Sol and Terra Verde are beautiful. Just make sure you're choosing St. Pete for the right reasons. And after that list, you're sitting here going, none of that is actually me. I get it. And there are 5 other communities in this region that probably are a better fit for you. And we'll talk about those at the end. All right, so this one comes up in almost every buyer strategy session that I have. Someone Googles St. Pete crime rate and gets scary citywide numbers and they get really nervous. So we need to get honest about it, and I need to show you how to do the research. So if you look citywide, St. Pete's overall crime rate sits right at about the national average. Crime grade actually gives the city a B grade, which puts it safer than about 2/3 of all the cities in the United States. And that's not the disaster the search results sometimes make it look like. And looking at how crime is trending right now, year over year, crime is down about 5.3% citywide, and violent crime specifically is down 7.3%. But again, here's the part that matters more. The citywide average is misleading because St. Pete neighborhoods vary wildly. Madison says it all the time, St. Pete is like a box of chocolates. You got areas like Snell Isle, for example, which has a violent crime rate of 0.3 for every 1,000 residents. That's 92% below the national average. Old Northeast, Crescent Heights, Euclid, St. Paul, parts of historic Uptown are consistently low. And the neighborhoods where the informed relocator and our clients are actually buying are statistically among the safest in Florida. Don't just take my word for it, do your own research. I always share with clients one of the best things you can do for yourself is go to the FBI's crime database and look at the city you're considering moving to, the neighborhood you're considering moving to, the type of crime that is occurring there, because it's all public record once it happens, and then compare that to where you currently live. Sometimes people are shocked to find out the things that are actually happening under their nose, but I think more importantly, it helps really reframe what the life is like compared to maybe what you're accustomed to now or what you're hearing versus the reality of what's taking place. Because the crime in St. Pete isn't a citywide problem. Typically, it's a neighborhood problem. And the neighborhoods where you'd actually live aren't the ones that are being impacted and have those types of association with them. But again, do your own research. And if you just use a little bit of common sense and do a little bit of homework, I think you'll find what areas probably suit your lifestyle best. So when you think about it that way, writing St. Pete off isn't the thing that you're trying to do. It's trying to refine the neighborhoods that align with that lifestyle and make sure you're also protecting your family and the assets that you're considering purchasing, like your home. So if we had to say, who is St. Pete actually for? St. Pete is for the person who wants walkable, historical, character, art, Florida, Sunshine City. They want to ride a bike to the coffee shop, sit on their front porch, know the names of their neighbors, and feel like they live in a real city, not a strip mall suburb with palm trees. It's for the person willing to do the flood zone and insurance homework upfront so they can stop worrying about it later. And for the person whose version of Florida lifestyle is more front porch and brick streets than gated communities and golf carts. And that's a very specific person. And if that's you, St. Pete is one of the best lifestyle plays in the entire state of Florida. And if that's not you, that's also a clear answer. Don't feel like you have to force it. These other lifestyles that are gonna suit you even better, there are communities in this area, Lakewood Ranch, Dunedin, Wesley Chapel, West Chase, Land O'Lakes, Parrish. There's all kinds of different areas you could choose, and these lifestyles are probably better suited for you. And that's a separate conversation probably worth having. So if you're trying to figure out which Tampa Bay community actually is for you, and you're ready to move past the research phase and start building a plan for that relocation, don't hesitate to reach out to me and my team. Like I said, all of my contact information is listed down below. There's even a link to my calendar where you can schedule a time. We'll jump on Zoom, unpack the area, build you your own strategy plan, and help you make this relocation a reality. I'm also going to put 2 more videos up here that are going to help you make this decision a little bit easier. And as always, until next time, go out and live that Tampa life.